This is a post-Israeli election analysis, an analysis which is a re-recording of the webinar of January the 27th, which had certain technical problems. Short time ago, Israel went to the poll for the 19th time to elect its Knesset, a single house parliament. This is Paul Liptz from the Anita Saltz International Education Center of the World Union for Progressive Judaism. A few words about myself. I made Aliyah to Israel one day before the Six-Day War from Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe. Taught for some 35 years as a social historian at Tel Aviv University, as well as some 2 decades at the Hebrew Union College in Jerusalem. I've been involved in a significant number of activities in Israel, and now as Director of Education of the Anita Saltz International Education Center, we are very active in a significant number of realms. We have 2 seminars coming up in the weeks and months ahead. One is the Butel Seminar for Progressive Jewish Leadership between February the 7th to the 17th, 2013. And the other is the Bergman Seminar for Progressive Jewish Educators on between July the 4th and 14th, 2013. The Anita Saltz International Education Center is presenting a number of webinars over the months, and we are the educational arm of the World Union for Progressive Judaism. Through high-quality educational programs, we provide a global forum for Reform Jews to engage in serious, quality Jewish study in Israel, as well as in Reform Jewish communities around the world, on topics of Jewish peoplehood and the centrality of Israel. The Saltz Center works with 7 regions around the World Union in 47 countries with some 1,200 congregations and nearly 2 million Reform progressive Jews. We are based in the heart of Jerusalem at the Merkaz Shimshon Beit Shmuel campus, where we welcome over 70,000 visitors each year at our various cultural and educational programs. The analysis that I would like to carry out is to reflect on Israel's Declaration of Independence. And I quote from Clause 13. The State of Israel will be based on freedom, justice, and peace, as envisaged by the prophets of Israel. It will ensure complete equality of social and political rights to all its inhabitants, irrespective of religion, race, or sex. It will guarantee freedom of religion, conscience, language, education, and culture. As I go through the election results, we have to realize that Israeli society has not yet achieved its goal. And you should be asking yourself and listening to me and looking at the slides, what are the challenges still facing us in terms of trying to achieve what our Declaration of Independence intended back there in May 1948. On slide number 7, you see the last 5 election results between 1999 to 2013. I will be analyzing these results in greater detail, but at this stage one gets a broad sense of what Israeli politics is about. In the last election of January 2013, 34 political parties stood for election. On condition that one receives 2% of the total votes cast, then one has representation in the parliament, in the Knesset, based on the division of the total votes cast as a proportion of the 120 members in the parliament. Financial assistance, by the way, is given to each party which receives a minimum of 1% of the total votes cast, and all political parties standing for office received free radio and television time. This is a major encouragement for political parties to stand, even if they only have a very limited amount of their own financial backing. To look at the slide, what we see here is a highly divided political system, whereby in 2009, at the end of the process, there were some 12 political parties, and we will have more or less the same number this year and for the coming few years, so we imagine. To take just 2 or 3 of the parties for detailed analysis. Kadima Party, formed before the 2006 elections, received 29 seats, received then 28 seats in 2009, being the largest party, one more than the second largest party in 2009, the Likud, but after some time split. A small faction of 2 remained Kadima, and they got into the 19th Knesset, and a break-off group received 6. The Labour Party did a little bit better than last time, up to 15. Shas remained at its 11 plus minus. The Likud was a mixed change party this time. It combined with Yisrael Beitenu and is now officially called Yisrael Beitenu. 31 seats for this combined party, of which the Likud faction receives 10 and the Yisrael Beitenu faction received 11. Habayit HaYehudi is in some ways a continuation of the old National Religious Party, formerly before the 1970s a centrist party which identified with the socialist left, but now Habayit HaYehudi is a right-wing party receiving a considerable amount of support from the Israeli citizens who live over the Green Line. The United Torah Judaism did better than before. The Meretz much better, doubled its number, and the 3 Arab parties pretty much like they were in the past. Slide 8, I think, is interesting. Fascinating facts. What do we know about the last elections? Firstly, voter turnout remains very high. Although the figure shows that it's approximately 68% of all Israeli citizens voting, by virtue of the fact that a very significant number of Israelis who are registered on the voting lists are out of the country at election. And as we have no absentee or postal voting, it means that many more people actually would vote if they could. To have a system like we do, with a considerable number of people voting, well over the 70s, says a great deal about the interest of the Israeli citizen in the political system, despite some very pessimistic commentary that we had prior to the elections. The percentage of Arab citizens who vote is lower. Once again, there was an expectation that that figure of 58% would be even less. We have a very significant number of new Knesset members, 48. A very large number of people, therefore, do not have political experience, and we will be analyzing this as we go through this particular program. The number of women increased significantly. 23% of the representatives are women, 27 in all, a significant number, and probably a figure which will grow with years. The number of people who are defined as religious is 39. However, one must realize that religious in the Israeli reality is a very heterogeneous term. 19 of them are Haredi ultra-Orthodox. That group in itself is divided between Ashkenazim and Sephardim and other divisions, and 20 of them are seen as modern Orthodox, not all of whom identify with the same political parties. An important figure is the 12 members who live over the Green Line. They are people who live essentially in the West Bank, Judea, and Samaria, and those 12 represent 4% of the Israeli citizen population. Therefore, what we find among people living, Knesset members over the Green Line, that it is very clear that they are a highly politicized group, fearing, as one might imagine, the possibility of changes being made in terms of territorial compromise. There are 11 Arab Knesset members, most of whom come from the three Arab parties, but not all, in addition to one Druze member, and there are also in the coming parliament 2 Ethiopians. On slide 9, we begin to see some of the internal dynamics facing the political system. Yisrael Beitenu, called Likud, Likud, which is a combination of Likud and Yisrael Beitenu, which is today being called Likud Beitenu, is a combination of 2 parties. Those 2 parties in 2009 were a very large group, 42 seats. In the January 2013 election, altogether they are 31 seats. On the pictures at the bottom of the slide, we see the top 5 people. There is an agreement, party agreement, whereby how you place the various Likud and Israel Beitenu members. What are the points for consideration which we see on slide 10? Clearly, Bibi is no longer the king. He has a powerful and important support group, both in Israel and in various parts of the wider Jewish world. He is a charismatic, fluent, English-speaking person with a significant amount of both diplomatic and political experience. He is leading a party, Likud Beitenu, which in a sense is a marriage with a very clearly defined divorce clause. There have already been discussions on how and in what situations they might split up. They seriously lost in compared with the 2009 elections, and part of it is that their support groups, who used to come from larger cities in Israel, have in some cases, in many cases perhaps, deserted them. Their main support comes from smaller towns and lower income groups. In addition, we are seeing the early stages of an important political phenomenon whereby there has been a tendency for Russian speakers, immigrants who by and large came to this country in the 1990s in large numbers, may in fact slowly be starting to desert the political right and moving to the center as they become a more settled middle-class group. Slide 11 tells us something about a new party, Yesh Atid, which in English means there is a future. This is a party which has come as a surprise. It received 19 seats with 8 very impressive women and 2 Ethiopian immigrant representatives. The party is a hodgepodge of different kind of people from different background. It includes both secular and religious, and the people who are on the list of the party, the 19 representatives, in many situations, while by and large middle class, also represent different kind of groups in the Israeli Knesset. Slide 12 indicates that there are challenges ahead. But firstly, let us ask how this new party did so well. We firstly have to mention that new parties are not an unknown phenomenon in Israeli society. The famous case study is the 1977 election, where the Democratic Movement for Change received 15 seats, but divided into 3 sub-parties after a relatively short period of time. Therefore, we are speaking about a situation where we cannot assume that Yesh Atid will remain a solid party for the full period of the next Knesset period. But what does it represent at this stage? Yair Lapid, a 49-year-old, suave, good-looking, fresh, exciting, extremely literate person who's written a significant number of books and is well known as a television personality, the son of a very dramatic anti-Haredi Tommy Lapid, who died some years ago, who attracted a great deal of attention. The Yesh Atid party came to the Israeli electorate essentially with 3 policy decisions. One is that they wanted to negotiate with the Palestinians. Not every one of the 19 Knesset members relate to that issue with the same sense of devotion, but certainly the number 5 on the list, Yaakov Peri, a former leader of the security services, has maintained that that is an extremely important component of the Yesh Atid party. Therefore, the possibility of Yesh Atid pressing for a two-state solution, a state of the State of Israel and a Palestinian state, if we accept Yaakov Peri as representing the mainstream of the Yesh Atid party, then we can expect some changes or attempts of change on that level. The party is committed to demanding equal obligations from the Haredi ultra-Orthodox group. This relates by and large to the lack of army service, the minimal amount of Haredim who serve in the Israeli army or do the alternative national service, and at the same time received a considerable amount of financial assistance in their various study environments. This is basically a middle-class party. Upwardly mobile Israeli society wants a party whereby most of the voters are city people, and towards the end of this program we will look at the results in Tel Aviv, which indicate just how popular Yesh Atid is for this particular clientele. However, at the bottom of the slide, I present the three major challenges that Yesh Atid may well find. Yair Lapid created this whole list by himself, a totally non-democratic act, which seemed to have been successful so far. However, he looked around for people who seemed to be capable, by and large, within a very defined part of Israel, although representing some groups, some secular and some religious, basically people who Yair could probably sit around in an evening discussion and feel very comfortable with all of them. But what will keep them together politically? That is the important question. Is the Yesh Atid party a fly-by-night party? By this I mean, what happens when a real crisis develops? What happens when there is a challenge of territorial compromise with the Palestinians? Will all the members respond in the same way? And as difficult as any challenge is, these are new Knesset members. Politics in all countries, and certainly in the State of Israel, is an occupation for those people who are aware of the intricacies of this kind of life. It is a difficult career. And the question is, what do they think will happen? And at the same time, what don't they know? Slide number 13 looks at the Labour, the Avodah Party, gained 2 seats between 2009 and 2013 with 4 women. On the one level, this seems to be successful. The observer looking at the results would say 2 seats was a good idea, and certainly looking at the 5 faces at the bottom of the slide, we see extremely capable people. Slide 14 indicates where there may be challenges. A significant number of them are new Knesset members. Seeing new faces in the parliament is good, but there are major challenges which the Avodah, the Labour Party, faces. Firstly, they expected to receive something in the region of 25 seats. The 15 seats which they received is a great disappointment to them. Many of the 15 elected members are extremely critical of Shelley Yakimovitch's leadership. She was expected to lead the Labour Party into an unbelievable, powerful position. And right at the beginning, early on in her campaign, she said that under no condition would she join the coalition government. That seemed to be a popular comment initially, but as one moves into the coalition stage, there is no doubt that some Labour Party members are very upset that she committed to staying in the opposition. She certainly didn't use her capable team in the campaign. She has, for example, Yitzhak Herzog, Eitan Kabel, Merav Michiali, Benjamin Ben Eliezer, very, very capable people who were essentially not seen putting forward the ideology of the Labour Party. Shelley spoke almost totally about internal economic and social issues, and yet her supporters wanted her to speak about peace issues as well. The question we will face is the following. Is there enough internal anger in the Avodah Labour Party which could result in some MKs bolting and joining the coalition government? Only the future will tell. The Shas Party received exactly the same in 2013 as they did in 2009. If we look at slide number 16, we see that there are important points for consideration. Firstly, this is run by a troika, 3 leaders, Eli Yishai, Aryeh Deri, and Ariel Atias. They have an extremely complex relationship between them and high levels of jealousy. The Shas Party is unusual by virtue of the fact that it is essentially under the command of the sickly Rabbi Avadia Yosef, who, by and large, has been dictating to the Knesset members how they should behave and how they should vote in the various elections. They are mainly concerned about the status of yeshiva students, and they are hearing from various political parties, on the one hand Yesh Atid, but as we'll see from other parties as well, that the significant number of Israeli voters are angry that yeshiva students received their privileged situation. The Shas Party sees themselves as protectors of the underprivileged, therefore receiving votes from the marginal populations in Israel, in many cases competing with the Likud in terms of that voting bloc. It's interesting that there are differences between the leadership and the supporters. The leaders, and particularly Aryeh Deri, has for many years indicated levels of sympathy and understanding both towards the Israeli Arab population and to the Palestinians over the Green Line. That particular perspective is not necessarily supported by their voters. And as we move into the coalition stage, in the last few days, increasingly we have heard that they are likely to cooperate. This Shas Sephardi Party, Jews from North African and Middle Eastern countries, are likely to cooperate with the Ashkenazi Haredi ultra-Orthodox branch of United Torah Judaism. Another party, which is partly new and partly old, is Habayit HaYehudi, the Jewish Home. 2009, 2 parties which provided the main votes for the Habayit HaYehudi were called NRP, the National Religious Party, and the National Union. The National Religious Party in the old days was a centrist party, very closely connected to the left-of-center socialist Ben-Gurion Mapai party, disappeared or reached a very serious low some years ago. They joined together with a certain faction of the National Union, and together in January 2013, they have 12 seats, 2 of whom are women. Slide 18 indicates what we have to look at. Once again, the importance of new Knesset members. We see both in the right-wing Habayit HaYehudi and the center-left party, Yesh Atid, the centrality of new Knesset members. In both cases, they are led by yuppie, in many senses, men, young men. Naftali Bennett, 40 years old, is a highly successful, high-tech man, dynamic, fresh, very active, conducted an extremely effective election program. He appealed to the young middle-class voter, not all of whom, incidentally, were religious. Habayit HaYehudi is perceived as a religious party. On the other hand, it received a significant number of secular Israelis who were more interested in voting for a right-wing party, regardless of whether it's religious or not, than a party which was distinctly secular. Some of the members of Knesset are very far to the right, and in fact the criticism of Habayit HaYehudi that if they are in the coalition and if there is talk of territorial compromise, there are a significant number of their members of Knesset who will not agree to giving up territory. They, like Yesh Atid, have a high agenda issue of equal obligations for the Haredim. The last point we have on the slide is of major importance. Naftali Bennett has spoken about annexation of 60% of the West Bank, Judea and Samaria. The figure 60% is the Area C of the Oslo Accord. Just to remind us, the Oslo Accord is the agreement between the Israelis and the Palestinians, which the late Yitzhak Rabin and the late Yasser Arafat signed, the Oslo Accord of 1993, which is the area which in the West Bank or Judea and Samaria, depending on which term one uses, is essentially area with a relatively small number of Palestinian citizens. We have to all realize, in terms of some of the discussion going on in the world, in terms of the attitude of the present American administration, and certainly in terms of the feelings of a significant number of European Union leaders, the concept that Israel could unilaterally take 60% of the West Bank would be an issue of major international importance and would certainly bring about a division in Israel, which we have seen in the past when discussions develop over the question of territorial compromise. Slide number 19 deals with Hatnu'ah. This is a break-off of Kadima, the former Ariel Sharon party. Hatnu'ah means the movement, not a wonderful word for a party. Hatnu'ah in 2009, then called Kadima essentially, received 28 seats. Now, in its divided framework, they receive 6 seats under the control of Tzipi Livni. It's interesting looking at the 4 pictures at the bottom of the page to realize how differently each of everyone are. Tzipi Livni, Amram Mitzna, Amir Peretz, and Elazar Stern are people who one would not normally imagine would be able to cooperate all that well. That issue will be seen in the future. Slide 20 shows us that 2 new Knesset members are on the Hatnu'ah list. They face serious problems like all parties. Firstly, they joined the campaign too late. They certainly thought they would get more seats. What is interesting about Hatnu'ah party, which is fairly centrist, center-left, but pretty close to the center, was the tremendous amount of emphasis that Tzipi placed on the peace process and two-state solution, an issue which pretty much disappeared in the political articulations of many of the other parties. It's interesting that she picked up that issue, not so much the religious issue and not so much the economic issue. Quite unusual, but probably indicating where she herself stands in terms of some of the major challenges facing Israel. And she, I think, was trying to emphasize the difference between the Likud attitude of Bibi Netanyahu, who, although he has spoken and did speak in his famous Bar Ilan speech about the possibility of a two-state solution, many people in Israel do not believe he is genuine about territorial compromise, and therefore she perhaps related to this point as being most important. Like many other parties, she speaks about equal obligations for the Haredim, that they should be involved in all aspects of Israel. Slide 21 is of the United Torah Judaism Party, Yahadut HaTorah. They gained 2 seats. Looking at the 3 pictures at the bottom, we immediately get a very good idea of who we are speaking about. Not surprisingly, among their 7 seats, there were no women. They have 1 new Knesset member. Their gain from 5 seats in 2009 to 7 seats in 2013 are largely due to 2 phenomena. Firstly, the average number of children that the Haredi families have, and here we are talking particularly about the Ashkenazi families, is 6.5 children per family. In addition to which the rabbis pushed the voters out to the voting booth. So one would imagine that they have an extremely high number of their citizens voting. Interestingly, there was a request by the Satmar Rebbe maintaining that any ultra-Orthodox Haredi Ashkenazi person who did not vote would receive $100. However, apparently that concept totally failed. The United Torah Judaism Party is split between two factions, the Misnagdim, coming from Lithuania and Latvia, and the Hasidic groups, who essentially, historically speaking, come from Poland, basically Eastern Poland, and Belarus, White Russia. In the period up to the elections, it was seen that there were clear tensions between these factions based on a significant number of issues related to leadership as well as their internal theological discussions. We are beginning to see that some of the younger Haredim are prepared to enter the army and workplaces, but the rabbis are very much against it, believing that this will have a domino effect. They are certainly likely to cooperate with Shas, and what we do know is that their party rabbinical leaders are totally insistent that there be no changes in the status of the yeshiva students. Slide 1023 is Meretz. We are now moving off the scale, essentially, of partners in the future coalition. Meretz, a leftist party, is supported by and large by Ashkenazi and essentially middle-class voters, received 3 seats in 2009, with a great deal of anger which was expressed by some voters towards the internal discussions and disagreements of the center-left. Some of those people then moved to Meretz, which gave them 6 seats in this last election, 3 women and 1 Israeli Arab, led by Zahava Gal'on, a very articulate and effective political leader. What should we think about in terms of Meretz? Firstly, like so many of the other parties, a significant number of new Knesset members. They are supported by Israel's intellectual elites. Mention any of the great names of the Israeli cultural world, certainly the great writers, led by Amos Oz and people of that stature, and you will find that they would be Meretz voters. The problem of Meretz is that it is perceived essentially as an Ashkenazi party. Their basic concept on all issues is a high level of tolerance and pluralism, and they certainly do not expect to be invited into the government, and they intend to be, in the years to come, as they have been in the past, a very active opposition group. The last 4 parties that we will discuss, in the case of 3 of them, we're essentially talking about the Arab Voters Party. The 2 parties which are in many cases similar, the United Arab List and Balad, received less seats than they did in the last election. Total in January 2013 is 5, as distinct through the 7 which the 2 parties received in 2009. The terminology of these parties can be argued, but essentially they see themselves as believing in Israel returning to the pre-67 borders. They're clearly totally insistent that a Palestinian state would be created, but to all intents and purposes, they would not ever intend to move over into a new Palestinian area. And as we can see on slide 26, their problem is that they continue to basically depend on a relatively controlled population group of Arab voters, 22% of Israeli citizens. There was a fear that many Arabs would boycott the elections. However, there were some interesting other ideas which appeared. The Arab League, a short period before the election, actually encouraged the Arab Palestinians, those Israeli Arabs who are Palestinian background at the same time, to vote, and said that Israel, as a democratic country, the Arab voters should recognize that they can influence the system. An interesting twist, that whereas the Arab League encouraged the Arab citizens to vote, an ultra-Orthodox Rebbe was prepared to pay $100 for his supporters not to vote. They failed to create contact with other parties, and they will without doubt remain marginal in Israeli political life. It is significant that 1 out of 5 Arab voters who voted on election day actually voted for Jewish Zionist parties, of whom the right-wing Likud and Shas picked up a considerable percentage. 8% voted for 2 right-wing parties for various reasons which we will not analyze at the moment. Hadash Party is a combined Jewish-Arab party. In 2009, as in the January elections, receiving in both cases 4 seats. The Hadash Party, a mixed party, has the support of Muslims, Christians, and Jews. The most active of all of them is Dov Chanin, a Jewish member who is extremely active in many realms of Israeli life, Israeli political life, and is in fact a very important member of the Knesset. However, like the 2 essentially other Arab parties, they will remain marginal. The last party that we will discuss before dealing with 2 other issues of the elections is the status of Kadima. 2009, they were the largest party. January 2013, only 2 seats, Shaul Mofaz and Yisrael Chasson. They are discussing the possibility of joining Likud as an integral part of Likud, or possibly joining Yesh Atid. Small group, just scraped in with 2 seats, just a little bit above the 2% threshold. Their strong point was a significant number of well-known local municipal leaders who supported them, people who are well-known, friends, probably in many cases who had known Shaul Mofaz, who has a very lengthy military career behind him. By and large, there's not a great deal of difference between the Kadima ideology and the Likud ideology, although they are somewhat more centrist and more sensitive to Palestinian issues. We're about to reach the end of this particular analysis, and I would now like to look at 2 final issues. One is voting patterns in selected cities, which we see on slide number 31. Let us try and work out what basically happened. We can see that we're going to make an in-depth analysis of 5 cities or large towns, and very quickly we'll get a sense of where the Israeli voter is. If we look at Jerusalem, we can see that 1 out of every 5 Jerusalem voters voted for Likud Beitenu, therefore for the Israeli right. And if at the end of the chart we see that Shas and United Torah Judaism received somewhere in the region of 28%, this indicates that Jerusalem is very clearly a right-wing religious city. So very different from Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv received almost 51%, over half of all the Israeli citizens in the Tel Aviv area voted for Yesh Atid. Tremendous differences between the cities. Tel Aviv, we're not talking about greater Tel Aviv, but the city of Tel Aviv is clearly a center-left area, significant number of voters from the Labour Party, and also Meretz, which on the national level received only 5% of the votes, received 14% of the votes in Tel Aviv. Ma'ale Adumim is an area over the Green Line, not far from Jerusalem, part of the controversial discussion that has been going on in Israel recently. We can see that as an over the Green Line party, they received the votes essentially from two parties, the Likud Beitenu and the Bayit HaYehudi. Dimona, a small development town in the south, which has faced over the years serious economic problems, received most of its votes from the Likud and Shas. Once again, we had indicated earlier that both these parties received support from marginal groups. And finally, in terms of the analysis of selected cities, Al-Fahim, an Arab city in the northern center part of the country, gave almost no support to Jewish parties except a small 1.2% vote to Meretz. By and large, Al-Fahim is a Hadash area. To take the last slide and to consider in a few moments some possible coalitions. These are 5 possibilities. As the day goes by, no one exactly knows which direction it can go. There are different emphases with each and every alternative. You can see for yourself, appearing on the screen, are the various parties which we have discussed. Possible coalition A, as in all cases, puts Likud at the top, being the controlling group. Therefore, the position of Bibi Netanyahu as Prime Minister is certainly assured. However, there are different emphases. Whereas coalition A is a center-right coalition, B is a center coalition. What we have is that Shas does not exist in B, and Hatnuah and Kadima take Shas's place. C is the one which is really unexpected and probably will not happen, but who knows. This is a coalition without Yesh Atid party, Likud Beitenu, Habayit HaYehudi, Shas, Yadut HaTorah, giving them 61 seats, which is extremely difficult to run the country just on that. D is the center with left. Once again, Yesh Atid is back. And here we are considering the possibility of a Labour Party split, with somewhere in the region of 7 remaining in the opposition and 7 joining the coalition. As I mentioned earlier, something which is not unknown in Israeli politics. And the difference between D and E is that in the case of E, we have here the return to the coalition debate, Shas, and that explains what we have there, and that's why it is likely, when push comes to shove, that while E is a possibility at the moment, because of the tensions between Likud Beitenu and Habayit HaYehudi, at the same time, no one knows at this particular moment which of the 5 alternatives will happen. We will only know that as the coalition debate continues. It started only now, and the weeks ahead will tell us in what direction Israel will move. To conclude this particular discussion, to remind you, this is coming from the SALT Center of the World Union for Progressive Judaism. We have, as I mentioned earlier, 2 seminars coming up, February 7 to 17, 2013. That's the Butel Seminar for Progressive Jewish Leadership and the Bergman Seminar for Progressive Jewish Educators between July the 4th and 14. We certainly hope that in the months to come, we will be having additional programs, that you will be interested in the kind of discussions that we feel that people who are interested in Israel would like to hear about, both related to Israel, to the Middle East, to questions of religious pluralism, and certainly to the position with various Jewish communities around the world. Thank you, Paul Liptz from Jerusalem. My sincerest thanks to Rabbi Steve Bernstein and Natalie Cohen of the SALT's International Education Center for their assistance in preparing this presentation. Thank you.